nationalities. Once again, you may list up to 4 family members living in one household on one card. I do believe we did run out of.
Nowadays, the increasing number of Chinese have the willing to migrate and reside in Canada. The majority of these individuals have regarded Canada as their first choice. Whenever Chinese people think of Canada, the clean water, blue sky, and beautiful countryside are normally shown in people's minds as the identities of Canada. However, are there any other factors that affect Chinese people's immigration preference? In fact, this research is aiming to compare the advantages and disadvantages between China and Canada so that it is able to explain the increasing amount of immigration from China to Canada. In order to do this research, various questions relating to the purpose are required to provide. For example, does Canada has better air quality than that in China? Does Canada has a more comprehensive medical system and welfare than China? What are the difference of tuition fees, annually average wages, or commodity prices between China and Canada? All of these questions are involved in 3 fields in terms of air quality, health, and average wages in both China and Canada. Now we can see that this is a diagram that counts the growth rate and a specific percentage of Chinese Canadians in recent years. Starting from 1991, the number of Chinese Canadians increased by 1.19 times, and it accounted for more than half of growth of Canada's population. Meanwhile, the percentage of Chinese Canadians also climbed from 2.5% to 4.4% by 2011. The last section reveals that the number of new Chinese immigrants to Canada ascended in the speed of 1.15 times of the previous year. So now is our hypothesis. The trend of immigration in 21st century is increasing. In China, people who tend to immigrate from China are more likely to choose Canada rather than other foreign countries. Possible causes for this phenomenon may relate to a better education, healthcare, and living standards in Canada. So, this is a diagram of world carbon dioxide emissions by countries from 1990 to 2005. According to the given line graph, the bright red and the black lines represent the carbon dioxide emissions in China and Canada from 1990 to 2025 respectively. The general trend of emissions in China shows a dramatic growth in the first 2 decades. It stood at over 2,000 and is predicted to reach over 8,000 in 2025. Conversely, the emission in Canada always stabilized under 1,000. What's more, considering of the median and mean, the emission in China is more than 10 times of that in Canada. Based on these collected data, it is manifest that the emission in Canada is overwhelmed compared to that in China, no matter in the past or in the future. Next, we are going to talk about the comparison of yearly average wages in both China and Canada. These 2 line graphs compare the annually average wages in China and Canada. In the latest 1 decade, the yearly average wages in Canada and China display increasing tendency with different growth extent. We can see that the correlation coefficient of yearly wages in China and in Canada are close, which are behalf of strong positive increase annually. According to the first diagram, the annually average wages in China stood at just over 2,000 in 2006 and increased to around 6,000 in 2015. Comparatively, there was a gentle increase in yearly average wage of Canada, which grew from roughly 38,000 in 2004 to just under 50,000 in 2013. This phenomenon indicates that the fluctuation of yearly average wages in Canada is smaller than that in China. It is manifest that the smaller fluctuation of annually average wages in one country, the smaller gap between rich and poor this country has. Now is the difference between China's and Canada's national health expenditure as a share of GDP. The national health expenditure is the sum of money provided by the government to citizens in terms of various health services. The share of national health expenditure of GDP represents to what extent one country lays the emphasis on medical system. In China, the percentage of national health expenditure of GDP fluctuated from 3.1% in 1978 to 5.1% in 2010, which showed a slightly climb during the 3 decades. Conversely, data collected in Canada increased dramatically despite some fluctuation in the last century, and the data is predicted to reach almost 10% of GDP till 2035. Based on this data, Canada focuses more on citizens' medical welfare than China.